Disclaimer. To the Pharisees and Karens out there.
How dare you!
All guests on this show do not reflect the opinions of the host. The purpose of this show is to have interesting conversations, stretch our minds, and grow.
Not what we want!
If you are looking for an echo chamber, viewer and listener discretion
is advised.
You talk about extreme.
What is happening and what is up? Hold out your glass, because we're about to fill it up.
Join us as we travel and explore the vast unknown. It's a hero's journey with dragons to slay, damsels to save, and innumerable treasures to hoard. Torches high.
Look at it from a different perspective.
What's going on, guys? Got a great treat for you today. I've got Doc Brown from the Prometheus Lens podcast on the show today. I had a great conversation with you and Brian on your show a few months ago now, and I'm really pleased to have you on the show. So anyways, appreciate you coming on.
Hey, man, I appreciate you having me. Let me come on your program and talk to your listeners, man. I'm looking forward to talking with you, man. It's always fun to talk with people with expanded paradigms, kind of bounce off each other. I love the conversations.
No, but anyways, Doc, I think it's awesome. As we were just chatting off air, we were saying how that me and you have kind of a wide variety of things we like to talk about, even though sometimes we get focused on a certain issue. And I think it's really cool for me to have you on the show is because obviously I've been talking about the little season a lot, and I enjoy talking about that. But kind of my first love of the conspiracy is the Nephilim. Genesis 6, the Book of Enoch. So Brian and I made that movie, Ancient Angels. So that's one of the topics that it really is, it will always have a special place in my heart. So anyways, you wrote a book. What was your book called?
Yeah, the Epic of Esau.
The Epic of Esau. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, man. Honestly, that was a gateway drug for me into all this weird stuff was the Nephilim giants. And so, yeah, it was definitely one of my first loves. But I was never what you would call a Bigfoot guy. And if you look at the cover here, it's got this hairy-looking wild man walking backwards with a bow on his back, and got the red stew here. He's walking away from the red porridge or whatever. But so it looks like a Bigfoot book right from the beginning, and I was never a Bigfoot enthusiast. I knew a little bit, about Bigfoot and the blurry pictures and videos and all that kind of stuff. But I was never what you would call an enthusiast. Mm-hmm. Just one day, talking with some friends, we joked about Bigfoot, and Genesis 25:25 popped in my head, and I'd never looked at it like Michael Heiser used to always say, just remove your preconceived notions, let the text say what it says. And I was like, whoa, the first one came out red, covered in hair from head to toe, weird, like a hairy cloak. I'm like, dude, that sounds pretty squatchy to me, man. And it just kind of led to like a 2-year deep dive obsession trying to find all these hairy wild men throughout the biblical texts and Jewish legends and lore. And man, it's littered with them. It's just kind of hidden in the extra biblical books and through the original languages.
Yeah, the story of Esau is very bizarre because, as you said, he's mentioned him being hairy and having red hair. But I mean, it's not just like an Italian guy who's hairy, because the way that Jacob and Rebecca deceive Isaac is that they take like animal skins and put them on his forearms in order to make it seem like it's Esau. But that's a lot of, that seems extreme, right? Because a lot of people have a little bit of hair on their forearms, but what was it, like goat skins? Was that what it was that they used?
Goat's fur, yeah.
Yeah, that seems like something altogether not human.
Exactly.
That's weird.
It's felt of a goat, man. It's thick, it's oily, it's coarse, man. You're never going to mistake that to be a person.
No, you wouldn't think so. But the thing that I've always struggled with that idea is that it's literally Jacob's twin, though, right? So, apparently they're distinctly different, but they did come out of the same womb. Mm-hmm. And so, there's no indication in the Bible that Rebecca was, I don't know, stepping out on Isaac. But what have you learned?
How else you explain it? You know,
I don't know. I that's what I'm saying. I really don't know. I'm open to everything, but I just don't know. Like, I'm one of those people who believe what the text says, and the text is true. But I'm okay with theorizing things that don't contradict the text, because Esau is a very important character in the Bible, and it's one of the few people that God explicitly states that he hated.
yes, that stands out to me. And I was like, man, that's pretty harsh. It's just supposed to be a God of love. He loves us all. We're all his children. But this one cat, this one, says he hated, not that he disliked or was angry with. No, he says, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. And so I was like, well, what's up with this guy? And then when you get into Malachi, it says that it makes a comment about his sexual promiscuity, pretty much. It says that he was immoral and like a sexual deviant.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, there's no story in the Bible that talks about him being like a whoremonger or anything like that.
It really doesn't say anything
why was
other
that there?
Yeah, it really doesn't say anything other than that he abhorred his birthright. So he had disdain for it. So of course, you just think in the biblical text, what you would see the contrast between a man of faith like Jacob, and then somebody who's the exact opposite, that he hates what God is offering. So then God in return hates him back. So yeah, I like to always remind people that when they say God loves everyone, I said, except for Esau, so he hated him. Yeah. So I wouldn't say that Esau's probably the only person he's hated, but I mean, like, that you do know that God is bigger than we are. And so to try to pigeonhole him into being one thing or being this just one attribute, God is a lot of things. And yeah. But he's true. He's the truth, and he hated him for a reason.
Exactly. And I tell people too, it's like, if you're not familiar with that story, just kind of like the highlight version of that is that Rebecca is old in age. Just it kind of mirrors the story of Sarah almost. Mm-hmm. She gets older in age. She's barren. She can't have children. Isaac goes to the Lord and prays, and she becomes pregnant, and she's pregnant with twins. And it says that the angel of the Lord comes to her during her pregnancy because she's, in a lot of pain and travail. And it says in the Legends of the Jews by Louis Ginsburg and Jasher and some of these other extra biblical books and stuff talk about they fought in the womb, that they were trying to kill each other in the womb. And so the angel of the Lord comes to her and tells her, 2 nations, 2 peoples are in your womb. And it says that one shall be stronger than the other, but the younger will rule over the older. So it's like when an ancient reader reading that would have been red flags all over the field, man. They'd been like, whoa, whoa, whoa. How's 2 nations, 2 peoples in this one person's womb? And also, why would the younger rule over the older? That's completely backwards of how it's supposed to be. And then when these kids are born, it gives this detailed account, and it says that Esau comes out first, and that Jacob is clutching his heel. And when I read that for the first time, and actually with this new set of glasses, I was like, man, this is just a few chapters. And of course, remember, this scroll, when it was originally written, didn't have chapters. It was just a few paragraphs down the scroll from Genesis 3:15, where he says, I will put enmity between her seed and thy seed. One will bruise one's head, and the other will bruise the other's heel. And then here, boom, we have this 2 nations, 2 peoples are in your womb. They're at enmity, at war with each other. And then when the kids are born, Esau has to push on Jacob's head to exit the womb, possibly bruising the head. And then here's Jacob clutching the heel, bruising the heel. To the ancient reader reading this would have been a Polaroid picture of Genesis 3:15, pointing straight back to that curse from the garden, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting. I got a little video to play. Maybe we can share some of this. I thought it was really interesting because it was connecting the Rothschilds with Esau and Edom. Have you ever heard anything like that? I saw this one little clip on X the other day, and I thought this kind of relates because it's kind of like breaking down the word Edom. So if you guys are not familiar listening at home, that Esau is the father of the Edomites. But where does this name come from? Because it really doesn't sound, it's not the Esauites, it's the Edomites. And I think it's it's kind of a transliteration on the name Adam, but it's Edom. But there's something kind of amiss there. Anyways, I don't know if you've seen this, but I'll play maybe a little bit of this. I think you might enjoy this.
The name Rothschild is deeply meaningful when translated into Hebrew. Perhaps the German Jewish name Rothschild is directly transliterated into Hebrew letter by letter to mimic its sound, rather than translated into Hebrew word by word to convey its hidden meaning, because the correct Hebrew translation of the German word Rothschild is Magen Edom, meaning shield of the Edomites. The Hebrew word Edom means red, as well as the nation of Edom descended from Esau, Jacob's evil twin. The name Edom is composed of the word Adam, Aleph, Dalet, Mem, plus the serpent letter Vav, which is a pictogram of a snake. The Hebrew word Edom signifies the joining of the holy bloodline of Eve with the satanic seed of the serpent through their son Cain by adding a snake, a Vav, to the name Adam. Edom is literally spelled Adam, who is also Eve, plus the snake of Vav in the Garden of Eden, to graphically and cryptically portray Judaism's secret doctrine that Gentiles are the satanic offspring of the evil serpent and Eve. Eve herself is said to be the evil, tempting female side of Adam, which means that Gentiles derive entirely from evil and have no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Many of the leading Rothschilds have had a messiah complex and acted as dynastical kings of the Jews, like King David.
Yeah, I guess that's all we really need to play. But I thought that was interesting. Have you ever heard that name came from some kind of a version of, it came from Adam, red, and it came from the serpent.
Yeah, I knew it was red, but I didn't realize that the whole thing with the insertion of the serpent, because I was sitting there just nodding away like, oh my gosh, yeah, because that's the trail that I went down, and reading all the ancient texts and extra biblical books and the legends of the Jews. That's what they all pointed to, man. And that blew my mind because I'd never heard it. I'm 40 years old, been a Christian my whole life. So when I found that, yeah, because like the Legends of the Jews by Lewis Ginsburg, it goes into a little bit further detail. And it says that, and I tell people, whether this is right, wrong, and different, we can debate, but we can't debate. This is the belief of the people of the time. This is what the stories they were telling and what they believe. So we can debate all day long if it's factual or true, real, physical, or spiritual, but with that out of the way. But it says in there that when she's in this great travail, that they're trying to kill each other. She's in desperate pain, and she goes around asking some of the other women around in that area if they had experienced the same issues or anything like that, and they all said no, but we have heard of one other, and they said it was the mother of Nimrod. And then it goes on to say that when they were going to be born, they were fighting over who was going to come out first, and it says that Esau threatened to kill Rebekah during the birthing process if Jacob didn't allow him to go first. So Jacob, for the sake of his mother, allowed Esau to exit. And then when it says that they're born, it says that Esau had a guardian angel, that his guardian angel was Samael, the viper of God, the angel of death.
Oh, that's really interesting. That Samuel,
and that he was born with a serpent branding also.
Have you ever read the apocryphal book called The Ascension of Moses? It's really interesting. It's not very long, but if you have read the book of Jude, the Epistle of Jude, there's a very obscure little part of that where Jude is telling this account of the story about how these people blaspheme even God's holy ones, so like his holy angels, his holy watchers, and they have no respect for them. And he's saying that even the archangel Michael, when he was battling the devil over Moses' body, he basically didn't even disrespect the devil, because he shows respect for the holy ones, regardless if they're good or bad. But I mean, that whole little story about how they were fighting over Moses's body on, I guess, Mount Pisgah, or whatever, whatever the mountain he did when he died.
Yeah, the land of the serpent.
Yeah, and if
Bashan.
you actually read the Ascension of Moses, it mentions who the devil's name is, and it mentions his name is Samuel.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was like the god of the material universe, or like the material world, like the physical world. And so that's why he was saying he had charge over that, so he could take that body. And yeah, eventually Archangel Michael is telling the Lord rebuke you. And eventually at some point it was like that it's shown that Moses was resurrected and he was taken away. But it's a really interesting story. And of course, I think it's interesting that Jude, out of all his very tiny little chapter in the Bible, he references this apocryphal book, and he also references the book of Enoch. So whether people say these books should be in there or not, Jude
They're referencing.
let us little breadcrumbs to go check that out. So that's interesting. So Samuel was Esau's guardian angel. That is,
Yeah.
I guess that tracks, right?
Was Gabriel.
Was that?
Or Michael. Yeah, his guardian angel was Michael.
Jacob's was. Is
Yes.
that what you said? So Jacob's guardian angel was Michael. And then, that tracks too, is because it mentions that the prince of God's people in the book of Daniel is the Archangel Michael. So that would make sense that you'd have Israel, who, Jacob's name was changed to Israel, that would have been his guardian.
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty cool, and it said he even had a serpent's branding on him and all that, And so when I started going through there, I bumped into, of course, we have the trading of the birthright, the red lentil stew, and that's another one. Didn't make any sense to me whatsoever, because, for those not familiar, because I tend to just keep talking about stuff and assume everybody knows what I'm talking about. So here lately I've been trying to do better at explaining stuff. But in the Bible, you get that birth and it kind of just fast forwards to their adulthood. And then it says that one day Esau comes in from the field exhausted, and his brother is making some red lentil stew, and he says, "Give me some of that stew, brother." And basically he says, "Yeah, you can have some stew, but you're going to trade me the birthright." And then the way you read it in Genesis, it's kind of like he half-heartedly just like,
Yeah, who cares about this?
What use is a birthright to me when I'm dead? Take it. That's what he says.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that makes no sense to me, because modern context, your father's Donald Trump. You're the eldest. You're set to inherit the keys to the kingdom, the millions of dollars, the company business, all the real estate, all of it. And you come in, your brother's eating a bag of Doritos on the couch watching Netflix, and you're like, "Hey, bro, give me some of them chips." He's like, "Yeah, sign over the company and everything you're going to inherit." Sure. What use is it?
Trade your inheritance
when I'm
for
dead.
this.
Yeah. And so when I found the book of Jasher, man, it just dovetailed perfectly and filled in all the gaps. And I believe that these stories in the Bible is kind of like the ESPN highlight reels, because the writers were like, there's no need to beat a dead horse here. Everybody knows about Genesis 6. Everybody knows about Esau. We have the scroll of Enoch. We have the book of Jasher. We have all these other scrolls that deep dive into this certain thing, and everybody's read them. Everybody knows them, so we don't have to beat a dead horse.
Right.
I think that was the mindset of the ancient writers. They wasn't thinking of us thousands of years later that's unfamiliar with these stories and these texts. But the book of Jasher fills in the gaps perfectly. It says that Esau was a mighty hunter, a Gibborim hunter, and that implies a hunter of men. And it says Nimrod also was a Gibborim hunter, a mighty hunter. And it says that Esau builds up jealousy and hatred and envy toward Esau all of his days. And then it says that one day he just goes out to hunt this beast of a man named Esau, like hunts him like a wild animal. And it says that he has a hunting party, and they all spread out looking for this guy, and two Kingsguard that was also Gibbor went with him. It says that Esau's out in the wilderness and spots them, and he hides himself. And at the opportune time, jumps out, cuts off Nimrod's head, and then battles the other two Gibborim and defeats them all single-handedly in battle. But the hunting party hears the screams, and comes running. And then it says that Nimrod takes the time to steal Nimrod's garments.
Or Esau takes the time.
Yes, sorry. Esau takes the time to steal Nimrod's garments. And it says these garments were the whole reason that Nimrod was able to prevail over all the nations. And then he runs home, hides the garments in his tent, and then he goes into his brother's tent, and it picks right up where Genesis was talking about. So, yeah, I mean, he came in from the field exhausted, all right. He just killed Nimrod and 2 other Gibborim. You know, so it's basically, modern context, you just killed the president. The feds are after you. You're on the run. You sustained some life-threatening injuries from this exchange and this battle. You're bleeding out. You're on the run. You're afraid. And you run to your brother to help you. And your brother's like, yeah, sure, he's an opportunist. You know, I mean, I'm not downing Jacob, but I mean, the context of the whole thing. He's
for sure. You
need my help, so it's going to cost you. You're going to give me the birthright.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, fine. What use is a birthright to me when I'm dead? Take it. So to me, that was like, dude, that makes a lot more sense than just, I'm hungry, give me something to eat. Because he was the mighty hunter. If he was hungry, I mean, he could have had lion steak or whatever he wanted. You know, there was a lot more to that.
Yeah, there's definitely more to the story. I think what's interesting is that I think from Jasher, and I'm unclear how much of Jasher is true, but I do think that context probably does make more sense of like there was something else going on, and it's trying to tell more of the story. But I believe the context in Jasher is that the garments that he stole from Nimrod were Adam's garments. And
that was another thing.
So God clothed Adam and Eve with these garments. And I actually think that garbage Noah movie, isn't there something about the fact that they're showing that where, this garment from Adam had some kind of power to it.
Yeah, and I didn't know that and see, when I found the garments, that was a whole nother rabbit trail that took me down. And every time you hear them talking about the birthright, they're talking about these garments. And it's basically the king, or the symbol of kingship and priesthood, according to the Jewish legends and lore. And when you go into the Ginsburg Legends of the Jews and Jasher, it says that Adam's coverings was the skins, the coverings of the Nakash, and it was given to Adam. And when you go to Ezekiel 28, talking about Satan, it says every precious stone covering, beryl, onyx, topaz, jasper, all these different multicolored stones, and it describes him in a priestly role.
Yeah, that's what I believe. Yeah, I believe
you
that.
Profaned your sanctuaries. It even says he had a sanctuary.
Yeah, that's what I believe. You know what? Actually, it's interesting. So I just got the Septuagint. I started reading some of that, and it's slightly different in the Septuagint, but I still think that role makes sense to me, is because what it actually says in the Masoretic text, kind of like the normal standard Bible, it would say you were a anointed cherub. But in the Septuagint, it says you had cherub. You were with the cherub. So a lot of people have connected the devil with being the serpent and the dragon, that he would have been a seraphim. But if you read the Masoretic, it seems like he was a cherub. He was not a seraphim. But I think that the Septuagint leaves room that he was. And that kind of makes more sense, is that, I mean, based on the context that the cherub are talked about in the Bible, is they are guardian angels. So you have a cherub that stands in front of the Garden of Eden to not let people get back in to get the tree of life. And then even you think about around God's throne, he has cherubs there. And I just picture them, as they're on the ark, as they're in the temple, that it's kind of like you walk in and the king's got his soldiers like right there. So like nobody's going to mess with the king. Nobody's going to mess with the king anyways, but I believe that that's their role. And then so I wonder if the seraphim class was like the high priest. So that whole kind of dogma in the church about, Satan was the music leader in church. It's like, no, I don't think that he was, because the way he's described having those stones on him, it reminds me of when Aaron's described of having the ephod with the 12 stones of the 12 tribes. And then so the devil has 9. And I think that 9 is a significant number. I think it may be even like, Lord of the Rings, you have like the 9 kings of men, you have like the Nazgul. There's something about
the difference between the Septuagint and Masoretic too. The Masoretic lists 9 stones, but the Septuagint lists 12. It lists all 12.
Oh, it actually does list 12?
Yes.
Maybe I missed that. Yeah, that's interesting. So it does. So he's got his own. Well, it makes sense, and it mentions that he has temples. So it sounds like that I believe that makes a lot of sense. That the way he's described as like a high priest, and then he walks amongst the fiery
Satan was the ruler of this world.
Yeah, if you think about it, he walks amongst the fiery stones. Seraphim are mentioned when Isaiah's seen a vision of the throne room of God. And I believe the fiery stones are like you have an altar in front of God. And so, like, is that the fiery stones that he was walking?
That cleansed his tongue, that pressed to his lips,
That's interesting.
So it made sense to me when I read that. I was like, okay, the Nakash done what he did, trying to deceive his younger brother. If you look at it in the family aspect, we're all sons of God. In the family of God, they're the elder brothers that Job talks about. They sang for joy at the sight of creation.
Morning stars.
We were made later. We're the younger brothers. So he tried to trick and deceive his younger brother, but it ended up getting him kicked out of his authority position, and that his authority position was then given to his younger brother. So his priestly garments, his sign of kingship and priesthood, was taken from him and given and bestowed upon Adam. And that when you go to the rabbis, they all trace their lineage of their starting of the Levitical priesthood to Adam. And that's what they seen these garments as. That was the birthright. And Jasher traces it. It goes to the eldest son.
So you're saying that the coverings described in Ezekiel 28 could have been the garments that Adam was given by God?
Yes, I believe so.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a different take on it, because I'm picturing like animal skin, something, I'm expecting like what God did to clothe them. But yeah, that's an interesting take. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. And so the book of Jasher even talks about this went to the eldest son. This was the birthright, and they trace it. It goes from Adam to Seth to Enoch, Methuselah, to Noah. It said Noah had them in the crossing of the flood. And it says that in Ham's going out, that Ham steals the garments.
Okay, interesting.
And gives them to Cush, and that Cush hides them. And it says in his old age that he has Nimrod. And it says Nimrod was the child of his old age, whom he loved exceedingly. And that at the coming of age, when he turned 20 years old, was given the garments. And it says that when he placed on the garments, that he became a Gibelrim. And it talks about the wearer of this garment, its kingship, its authority, priesthood, and that all of creation is subjugated to them. It says that the beasts and animals of the field even bowed down to the wearer. And it says that this is why Noah was able to get all the animals on the boat, because he had the garment, and they obeyed and listened to him. Like I said, whether it's real or not, this is the legends and lore that's going around in the thought system of the people of that time. So that's how Nimrod had those garments. And Esau knew what they were. So when he killed them, he took them. And even in the story of Esau in the Bible, you see those garments several times, but it's just kind of hidden in the language. And if you don't know, you don't know. But you talked about the deception of Rebekah and Jacob, right? Covering him up in that goat skin. Well, when you reread that story, if you pay attention in there, there's a little caveat thing mentioned. It says that before he goes in, as like the cherry on top, it says Rebekah goes to Esau's tent and takes his special garment and places it upon Jacob before he enters the room.
Okay.
I think that's the special garment, the birthright, the sign of kingship and priesthood was placed upon Jacob.
That's interesting. So the one thing I want to ask you about, just to see what your thoughts are, though. So if Esau was some kind of a hybrid type creature, not fully human, why do you think the Bible says that he was actually Isaac's favorite son? Because it seems like they intimate that Isaac prefers Jacob because he prefers Esau because he was a hunter, and he came back and he prepared these great meals for him, and And he wanted to give Esau the birthright, but Rebecca being told by God to no, it's the younger one. Why do you think that Isaac would have preferred the hairy boy?
Well, for one, I think is, tradition. Tradition dictates that the eldest gets the blessing and the birthright. So there was one angle that was tugging on him. But then on the other side of it, you have, are you a father, Joe? Yeah. Well, I am too. So if we have sons, our sons, we want them to, we kind of live vicariously through them sometimes,
Right.
We want them to excel and do good, and we want them to be a man's man. And that's exactly what Esau was. He was a man's man. He was an alpha male. Mm-hmm. He was big. He was strong, excellent hunter, obviously excellent skills in combat, excellent warrior to be feared. He was a man's man. Mm-hmm. So I think it was kind of like the high school sports football dad sitting in the stands with his sons, running everybody over, hitting touchdowns, and just dominating everybody. That's my boy. I think that's kind of what was going on there, because one tradition was dictating that Esau would be the favored son, but also he was a man's man, and that's why he loved him so much. But it goes on and talks about the contrast is Jacob. It says that he was a man. He was
mama's boy.
Yeah, he was a girly guy. If you want to put it that way, he was in the tent helping mama on her hip all the time, and he was a studious man, liked to read and all that kind of stuff. So they were once again just complete opposites. And to the alpha male, that's a beta male. The alpha male doesn't cherish or look up to or venerate the beta male typically. Mm-hmm. So his son Esau was the alpha male, I believe. But the big question, and I know if the people's not listening to me talk about this or read the book talking about this, the very first question that pops in your head, or should, is, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, well, how did two different peoples, two different, seeds or nations wind up in this one woman's womb? And I tell people, the Bible doesn't tell you. It doesn't come right out and tell you. But all the other books and scrolls point to him being a serpent seed. Now, whether this is physically true or spiritually true, I tell people we don't know, but it could be physically true or spiritually true. So it's a good possibility. I mean, I try to lay all cards on the table because I don't know. I speculate. I read the texts and see what they say and kind of formulate my opinion and see what I think they're pointing to. It could have very well been that Esau was such a wicked man and thorn in the side of God's people, and the Edomites were a thorn in God's people's side, that when they wrote about him, they painted him in the most negative light they could. That they like, oh, he's a son of the serpent,
son of the devil.
He physically, wasn't. Maybe he truly wasn't that physically that hairy, but they made him out just to be this beast, to be recoiled at. We don't know. But just reading everything at face value, I tell people one thing that I find compelling and feasible on the physical side is that when Eleazar goes to get Jacob a son, he goes up and goes to the land of his father in Haran, and he goes by the well, and Rebecca comes out and offers him the drink and stuff, and he's like, oh, this is her, this is the one, and takes him back to Laban's house, or Laban comes out and takes him to his father's house. It was Bethuel, I think. But I think their first interaction is pretty telling. When he walks up, he's like, oh, my master owns all this land and got, he's wealthy and got all these animals, and his son is of age looking for a wife. I've been sent here to get one. I think your daughter would be a good fit, and he serves the Lord Yahweh. Well, Bethuel responds with, this Yahweh you speak of, I can neither speak good nor evil. So he didn't know who Yahweh was. They weren't worshiping Yahweh. And Rebekah was old enough to be of marrying and breeding age, and she grew up in this house serving pagan gods. And the Epic of Gilgamesh, you have this guy named Enkidu. I think he, is like a carbon copy, different version of the same guy. Because Enkidu, he was covered in hair from head to toe. He was a mighty hunter.
And wasn't Enki, a lot of people believe if that was a real entity, that was probably the devil, Enki?
Well, Enki was the devil, and it says that Enkidu, he created
Okay,
Enkidu.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
But it says that he created him in the text, and he even fights Gilgamesh, who a lot of historians line up with Nimrod. So it's kind of mirroring the book of Jasher. And it says that when he made him, though, he made him in the image of Sam Quain. And remember, this is the same area, the land of Haran, where Rebekah grew up serving these other gods and things. Sam Quain was a fertility god, and he was covered in hair from head to toe, and it describes it was matted hair. And that's who Enkidu was made in the image of.
Okay,
so
interesting.
They were already worshiping this god, this fertility god in this land. She grew up worshiping it, sacrificing to it, knew it well, was familiar with it. Well, they accept the offer, and she goes back with him. But it says her handmaiden goes with her. So I tell people, is it out of the question for a woman in the ancient world to get up there in age, cannot produce an heir, to be scared? Yeah, because that's the number one thing a woman was for. If you couldn't produce a male heir in a lineage, you were replaced. You were kicked out and replaced with a younger woman. This is why Sarah was freaked out and gave Hagar to Abraham, right? So we see this kind of repeating pattern and know that's how it was back then. So is it out of the question for Rebekah to be scared and freaked out that this God Yahweh, who she just recently come to know, she didn't grow up knowing this God, is not blessing her womb? So is it out of the question to think that maybe she would have turned to a familiar God that she grew up worshiping since she was a child to adult age, worshiping it, sacrificing to it, and this was a fertility god? And I tell people, if you want to protect the virtue of Rebekah, maybe it was her handmaiden. Maybe unbeknownst to Rebekah, her handmaiden prayed to this fertility god and asked for her to bless his womb. But either way, I think it's interesting, to say the least, that one of these children come out covered in hair from head to toe, and they use goat's fur to mimic his hair, and it looks just like this fertility god from the land that she came from and that they worshipped.
Yeah, that is bizarre. I want to say, even in the story, like, Laban is still worshiping false gods in the times of Jacob and Rachel. They have the household gods that Rachel steals. So like the story arc of Jacob is not as linear as people think either, is that because he does kind of do a shady thing to get the birthright and does a shady thing to get the blessing. And then when he leaves, he's not really fully walking the path. It's not until he wrestles with God, which is interesting. If he was a girly man, he did wrestle with God and didn't lose, right? So that's how I get the name Israel. But yeah, there's a whole lot of interesting parts about that. I think what I find interesting about the story is that, so the way you kind of, at least when you read it the first time, so Jacob and Rebekah are tricking Isaac into giving Jacob the blessing, which is kind of funny because Esau had already traded his birthright for the soup, but he still needed the blessing from Isaac. And then so obviously Esau was going to kill Jacob because he got the blessing. So it's like he still wanted the blessing, you know what I'm saying? Like, so he traded the birthright for a bowl of soup, but isn't that kind of what, I guess from our perspective, what is different between the birthright and the blessing? But
I believe it was kind of like the lawyer stamp, because he verbally agreed with his brother, But he was kind of
Right,
like,
yeah.
fingers crossed behind his back. It's like, dude, I'm dying. I'll tell you whatever you want to hear if you'll save me, because if I live, I'm not going to do that. You're crazy. And so when he calls him in for the blessing, this is kind of like going to the lawyer's office, putting that stamp on it. It's official. Because if he planned on honoring that agreement, that'd have been the perfect time for him to be like, Dad, I appreciate it, but I already traded my birthright to Jacob. He doesn't do that. He's like, okay, I'll be right back. And he takes off, So if he was planning on honoring that agreement, that would have been a perfect time to decline the blessing. But no, like you said, he wanted it. He was pissed that he didn't get it. He threatened to kill his brother.
You know what? So what I really find really interesting is that, but what you said is that he's dying, but the Bible does not indicate that he dies then. Did you ever notice that? That what's crazy is if you actually read how old Isaac was when he died, he was 180. So if you think about it, his sons were born when he was like 60 years old. So it's like the whole time that Jacob is with Rachel and, trying to marrying Leah and Rachel. So he's there 21 years with Laban. And then he comes back. So Jacob is actually, or Isaac is still alive then. So the whole stuff, based on like the chronology of all this stuff, I just think it's really weird because it's kind of like, what is Isaac doing? Even like, yeah, so all that being kind of said is the fact that, it's fun to theorize about these things and use kind of extra biblical text to try to make sense of the story, because when you read the account of just Isaac, who's really important, there's barely anything about him in the Bible.
Yeah.
And it does intimate that he is on death's door when he's going to give this blessing out. But he's not. He's actually going to live a lot longer than that. And so what is his interaction with Esau during this time? Because you'd make you believe that Jacob ran. He ran away, but Esau had stayed. So what's Isaac's and Esau's relations in all of this long time that's taken place?
Yeah, well, the Bible basically says that he goes into full rebellion. It says that after this happens, he takes 3 wives, and 2 of them are from the Canaanites, who they're commanded not to, interbreed with and intermarry with. And thanks to people like Gary Wayne, that's, deep dive through the genealogies, we know that those 2 tribes that he took from was Hivites and Horites, and they were known Nephilim giant clans. So here's where you get the Nephilim stuff inserted. So he marries into Nephilim giant clans, and it lists one of his father-in-laws as Seir. In the etymology of that word, it means rough, rugged, hairy. And it says that he reigned from Mount Seir. So here you have feral, what it's describing, feral giants covered in hair. And here you have this hairy, quote-unquote, man, Esau, marrying into him and breeding with them. So you have a high probability of throwing some strange pups here, folks. And when you follow the genealogy line, here's where Amalek comes from, this union. And he birthed the Amalekite race.
And they were like blood drinkers and
exactly
magicians and all kinds of weird stuff that
sorcerers,
they did.
Shapeshifters, blood drinkers. So I thought that was pretty wild. And then his 3rd wife, he goes to Ishmael. He goes to his uncle and takes a wife. And I thought that was pretty telling too, because, if we have something happen to us, a death in the family or whatever, a loss of our father, we want to go talk to someone that has lost their father. We want to talk to people that can relate to our situation. And I think that's what Esau does, because if you go to Ishmael was just like him.
Right, yeah.
He was the firstborn son, supposed to get the birthright, but his younger brother, quote-unquote, screwed him out of it. And so I think he would have found nobody else better to sympathize with him. And from this lineage is where you get all your Muslim nations, the other side of the fence of the Jewish people. So here's where you get the seed war. Once again, Genesis 3:15, I'll put enmity between thy seed and her seed. They're battling over the land even today. This is a battle of the brothers that one thinks that it was screwed out of its birthright and its inheritance, I believe.
You know, the irony is, King Herod in the times of Jesus, he was an Edomite. Did you know that?
Yes.
So I think that's really interesting, is that there was a time, and I think that people, especially when you talk about the bloodlines today, people try to see it as so black and white. I don't think that it was. I think it had been a lot muddied after the captivities of Assyria and Babylon. So by then, it's kind of like, even when in the times of Nehemiah, when they come back and they are trying to show their genealogies to prove who they are, lots of them can't.
Mm-hmm.
So you could imagine that these people are all still related. Like, all of them are still related. Because you're saying that Hagar, and Abraham begot Ishmael. But it's still a son of Abraham. And it even mentions that Abraham had more sons after he had Isaac, after Sarah had died. So then you have all these, again, Father Abraham had many sons, and many sons have Father Abraham. He had lots of nations came from Abraham. So so you have like the Semites. Well, people don't really understand what a Semite is. It's a Shemite. All Abraham's children would have been in the line of Shem. So Ishmael too, Esau too. So they're all kind of related. Even then you get into the Moabites and the Ammonites. Those are from Lot's line. So they're all, so all those people, and that's why when the Israelites come into the Promised Land, they're not to take out the Edomites, they're not to take out the Moabites or the Ammonites, because God had made promises through their patriarchs. So it seems like it is a little bit muddy, but I think it's interesting when people try to say that the Muslims come from Ishmael's line, which, I mean, I'm sure lots of them do, but Paul says that the Israel that's on the earth is Hagar. That's the one that's in bondage. And then the one that's in heaven is the free one. So he's contrasting. There is a physical bloodline, but there's also a spiritual thing. And that's like when you're talking about, is Esau literally a child of the devil? Well, Jesus calls the Pharisees children of the devil. Mm-hmm. And so like, is he saying that literally, or is he saying that if you're like Abraham, you're a child of God and you're a child of Abraham, but if you're trying to kill the Messiah, well, then you're after your father's nature, who's a liar and a murderer from the beginning, and that's his character. So you guys have the same character as your father. So I mean, it is interesting to think that, through Christ, obviously, all these things, regardless of what bloodline you're in, it's Jesus' blood the only thing that matters. But yeah, it's really interesting to speculate. So do you think that when it came down to Esau's line interbreeding with these giants, is this where we get the modern Bigfoot and kind of like the European legends of the wild man?
Yes, I think so, 100%. Because I tell people, if you look at Esau's description, if you saw this thing or person described, without hesitation, you would say, I've seen a Bigfoot, I've seen a Sasquatch. They're all described as humanoid, covered in hair from head to toe, and 7 to 10 feet tall, big. So I think it's what the ancients would have they didn't have the term Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but they had giant, a feral giant. You have Seir, who was a giant, and Seir, the etymology means hairy, so you have a hairy, feral giant. And with our modern context vernacular, I think that's what we would call it. We call it a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. And you have the wild man stories all through Europe. You go to China, it's called the urine. It's everywhere. Krampus, Sardinia has this archaic practice that they do to this day, and they don't even know why they do it. They say, we think it's this or we think it's that, but we really don't know. It's archaic. We've been doing it as long as we can remember. But during the winter solstice, the men will cover themselves in black goat's fur from head to toe. They'll put hand-carved wooden masks on their face and strap hundreds of copper bells on their backs. And they will dance through the streets and chase and abduct women. But today it's all PG-13. There's nothing, no raiding or pillaging going on. But you can imagine what it was like during the archaic times.
Wasn't it kind of interesting just to think of like the contrast between Jacob and Esau, and so you get into those ultra weird Christmas mythologies in Northern Europe where you have Santa Claus, right, and then the opposite of him is Krampus.
Mm-hmm.
Is that showing you a Jacob and Esau type dichotomy?
Oh yeah, and when you look at that though, what I thought was really telling is like this is characteristic traits of these feral giants. You know, I think we would call Bigfoot, because just throwing out some random things here, but like when he walks into the tent of his father, Jacob, with that goat's fur on, he says, I hear my son Jacob, but I feel my son Esau.
Mm-hmm.
He says, but you smell of the field, so therefore I know you are my son Esau. And you get all these stories about Bigfoot and Sasquatch and how they stink and the smells that you get, you know.
The skunk ape and stuff like that.
Yeah. And when you get to the Amalekites, remember, this is the people that first interact with God's people in the Exodus and their wilderness wanderings.
Mm-hmm.
And here's where you get all your do not do this, do not do that. You don't get rules, laws, regulations unless people are breaking those said rules, laws, or regulations. So I think that's pretty telling of the first people that they encountered in their wilderness wanderings, the Amalekites, who we know their name means blood lickers, who we know through Rabbi Rashi and some of these other writings that they were sorcerers and known shape shifters. That's why this is the only group that God commands them to kill every man, woman, child, and animal.
And the animals.
Because they were known shapeshifters. Okay? So those rules, let's look at them real quick. It says, no longer shall you drink the blood. The life force is in the blood. Their name means blood lickers. No longer will you pass your children through the fires of Molech. We know that they were passing children through the fire. And even in that Sardinia thing that I was talking about, during this winter solstice, while they're dancing around with goat's fur on, the children that are coming of age, they light a huge bonfire. And as a rite of passage, they have to leap and run, jump through, and pass through the fire. So the characteristics are all there. And then he tells them, no longer will you sacrifice to what? Hairy goat demons.
Yeah.
Okay, these are hairy feral giants. And just you have all these different things that I think that are just pointing straight to the practices and beliefs of this people group.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if it could be something so in modern times, we obviously know that the big Satan, I believe that there's more than one. It mentions in Enoch there's more than one Satan. Now, we know that there was one serpent in the garden. And then I believe in Revelation, it ties Satan, the serpent, and the dragon as all being one being. But if you think about like kind of the antediluvian times, you would have had these powerful watchers. And these watchers would have been probably maybe not as powerful as the devil, but they were, you know, like all the other archangels. I mean, who's the most powerful? Michael, probably, but I mean, Gabriel's no slouch. So in the same way, you'd have this kind of evil kind of sect of the angels, and they're all powerful. And so I think it's interesting. It almost intimates that Azazel might have been kind of the big bad Satan in the days of Noah. And so I think it's interesting, as you mentioned in Leviticus, it talks about how they have this Day of Atonement, and then they have these two goats, and they sacrifice one, and one they take all the yuck from the sacrifice, and they stick it on the scapegoat, and they send that one out into the wilderness. And literally the Bible says this, they send it out there to Azazel. And then, so I think maybe the next chapter later, saying you can't do your sacrifices outside the camp, because if you're going out to outside the camp, this was the wilderness of sin, and this is Azazel's domain. And so I wonder if it has something to do with that, because he was considered the scapegoat for the reason that everyone blamed the flood on him. Like he was the angel who caused all, like he taught men what the weapons of war, taught him how to make the weapons of war. He taught him about warcraft. He taught him about all the worst things that Azazel taught men. So I wonder if there is that kind of connection of like the goat skin that deceives Isaac, this goat demon. And so if maybe he wasn't the seed of the serpent of today, but maybe he was kind of the original big bad. There's some kind of a line through that wicked being Azazel.
Yeah, and then even the book of Isaiah, talking about these same groups of people, I believe, he says that you got to go to the Septuagint for this, but the Septuagint, it says that the satyrs, the wild men, will dance in what? The wilderness and the desolate cities. And you have this, event in Sardinia. They're covering themselves in goat's fur, bells on their back, and they dance through the streets, just like Isaiah says. You have all these legends of Pan, Faunus, Sylvanus. All of these dudes are covered in hair, fertility gods, and they're known for their sexual promiscuity. I mean, it's another parallel with Genesis 6, man.
Yeah,
Nothing
that's interesting. So it also in the Bible, so when Jesus has the transfiguration and when he tells Peter he's going to build his church on this rock, it was Caesarea Philippi, which would have been where Mount Hermon was. Mount Hermon is where the Watchers came down, but also they had this entrance to hell there. And I believe it was some kind of altar, some kind of a place where they worshipped Pan, the goat demon.
Yeah, 100%. And then you have Jesus talking in the parables, right? What does he say? He says he's going to separate what?
The sheep from the goats.
Sheep and the goats. Yeah, 100%. And one thing that I found too that was just beautiful to me, and I love finding this stuff, man, because I get some people give me a hard time. It's like, Dad, why are you looking at this stuff? It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is Christ alone. That's a distraction. It's like, man, my foundation is firm and set. But looking and finding all this stuff, to me, it excites me. It invigorates me. It solidifies my faith. You know what I mean? And yeah, I want to find this stuff, man, because it does nothing but just solidify my faith and excite me and draw me closer to God, man. 100% every single time. But one thing I found through this research of this book was like micro and meta narratives. And it's all through it, man. It's beautiful that you have this book, this 66 book, written by hundreds of different people, spanning thousands of years. But it's one story flowing perfectly, and there's all these macro and micro narratives woven into it seamlessly, man. And so I had mentioned earlier, the family of God, the elder brother, the younger brother. And I discovered that through reading Timothy Alberino's book, Birthright. And so that kind of gave me this perspective when I was reading through this stuff. But, it says that the angels were created first. They sang for joy at the sight of creation. We were created later. We're the younger brother. And we have that narrative throughout the entire Bible repeated over and over and over again. And without fail, what happens?
The younger one gets the birthright.
Favors the younger brother. The younger one gets the birthright, and it's
prodigal son
from the older one and given to the younger one. So you have that with this, the giving of the garments and passing of the birthright to Adam. You have this story, like you said, the prodigal son. What happens? He leaves. He wants his birthright now. He squanders his inheritance. He's welcomed back. A ring of authority and a cloak of authority placed back on him. What happens? The elder brother's pissed.
Yep.
That's our angelic brothers. They're like, I never left you, Father. I've never desecrated our family name. You never threw me a big party. Where's my fattened calf? And Jacob and Esau, Cain and Abel, again and again and again. Am I saying that these stories are not real? No, I think they're historically real. But I think it's like an onion, man. There's so many layers, and it's telling the overall macro narrative of us and our elder brothers, the angelic race. And us returning like the prodigal son to the family of God. But there's a group of our elder brothers that it really pissed off, and they rebelled.
Yeah, I agree. I do actually believe that. I know some people would just think this was like a dogma in the church that we, when we are resurrected in heaven, we're going to be angels. But I actually think that's pretty much true. I mean, Jesus said we'll be like the angels. Daniel chapter 12 says that the wise are going to shine like the stars. And so it does make sense to me that you have the heavenly host and a third of them rebel and they fall. And then so what happens? God does a thing that they did not expect, because they look at us and they say, look at all the faults in them. They don't look like us. And God says, watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to make them like you. And they're actually going to be judges of you guys, the ones who fell.
Amen.
And I think it's an awesome story. And I think obviously it's in God's character, because God is not looking at what you are right now. He's looking at who you can be, and he's looking at the best of what we can be. And so then he's looking on these people who, of course, the devil, his main sin was pride. So it's the people who God has given the most have the most to be thankful for, not to have the most be puffed up. You should give him more respect. It's like the greater you are, you have the more to be thankful for. And then so the lesser is the one who's, they know that they're not good enough. And then so then obviously God allows his grace to work within us. And yeah, that's a great story. I was kind of trying to get with one other thing. I wanted to get to the topic of Nimrod a little bit. So just one last thing I want to get to is that, so what's your belief on how the Nephilim came back? Because I think it is interesting that according to the biblical text, all we know is there's giants before and after the flood, but God judges the whole earth. There's only 8 left on the ark. So how did they come back? Do you believe in like a second incursion, or do you believe that, I know Brian and I differed on that, was that he believed that one of the son's wives had some kind of a genetic corruption, and it was like a Punnett square kind of chance that they're, genetically they kind of came back, and maybe not in the same form. What's your take on that?
Yeah, honestly, I'm one of these people, I say it all the time, and it's kind of a cop-out, but I mean, it's truly what I believe. It's never this or that. It's usually this and that. It's a combination of things, and I think that's another example. Some of the legends and lore say that Og was on the boat.
Yeah, he was like holding on to some kind of like anchor, and that he even cut a deal.
He told Noah, let me hang on to the boat, and I'm strong, I'm big, I can really help you out. I'll promise to serve you and all this stuff. I'll give you my loyalty. And he got carried through the other side of the flood. Like I said, true or not true, that's one of the stories and legends.
And that kind of that kind of mimics a little bit the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? That Gilgamesh was kind of he like kind of did something similar to survive the flood. Is that right?
I ain't familiar with that.
Yeah, I want to say that
it talks about he broke the oars or something like that on some kind of boat, and he was trying to reach Utnapishtim to
it was something.
Life.
It was something similar to that, because he didn't get in a boat, but like maybe he kind of hitched a ride on a boat or something to survive the flood. I could be totally off on that. Okay, so you think that it could be there was survivors, and you had some.
It could have been that, and then there's also stories. The Testament of Abraham. It talks about that where it gives Noah's wife. It says that it was his second wife, that his first wife had passed, and that the wife that got taken on the boat was his second wife, and that was Naamah. And Naamah was through Lamech, and that she was of the serpent seed of Cain lineage, and that God instructed Noah to take her as wife to preserve the seed of the serpent. So therefore his prophecy in Genesis 3:15 would still come to pass, that he preserved the bloodline of the serpent so it could fulfill its end times purpose. Once again, that's interesting. True or not true, it's a story.
Well, it's really interesting. I don't know if you ever caught this. This is me speculating just based on what the text says in the Bible. But so the story goes is that the ark comes to rest. Noah makes a vineyard. Eventually, he gets drunk on the wine. He falls asleep naked, and then we're told that Ham comes over and he uncovers his father's nakedness, and so the other sons are not about that. And so what's interesting about that is that just the language of like uncovering someone's nakedness, because if you actually get into the Levitical commandments about
18
not having sex with your mom, that's the language it uses. Do not uncover your father's nakedness, because your mom is your father's covering. So, because I thought it was really interesting is that, so Noah gets up very angry, and he curses not Ham, but he curses Canaan, Ham's son.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's really interesting, because, of course, if you think about how the story goes, is that it's the Canaanites that are a bunch of giants there and a bunch of weird stuff there. So I think that there's got to be something about that, because why didn't he curse Ham?
Yeah, and that was a story too. And I got that in the book here, but it says he uncovered his father's nakedness. It means he slept with his father's wife.
I think that's what that means.
An act of rebellion in the ancient world. Let Scripture interpret Scripture. What happens when David's run out of the kingdom by his son?
Right, he lays with all the concubines.
In the sight of all of Israel, it was a flex on the old man. That's how you did it back in the day. What did Reuben do to try to usurp the
that's
family
right,
dominance?
he did.
Slept with all his father's concubines too.
Yep.
So this is something they did. It was repeated. Let Scripture interpret Scripture. This is how the young men tried to usurp the authority position of the household. So he does this deed, right? And if the testament of Abraham is right, if this is Naamah from the serpent seed lineage, and it was Ham's mother, because Ham was the youngest, and then he sleeps with his mother, and it says that when Noah awoke from his drunkenness, there's no time frame on that. People assume that's the next day. I mean, this could have been months later after he drank all the wine. There's nothing left to drink.
Yeah, he had a rough.
He sees a baby bump.
He had a rough part of his life when he was seeing. Yeah, that's interesting, because
so he sees this baby bump, and they were going to name it Canaan, and he knew it wasn't his. So
right, that's
cursed be Canaan.
That's an excellent
incest
point.
Baby from the serpent seed line. And what I thought was really cool, and I'll shut up after this. I know I'm getting long-winded. Sorry.
No, you're good.
In the Masoretic text, it says that when the brothers find out, that they take a garment, walk backwards, and cover their father's nakedness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Septuagint has a not Septuagint. I'm sorry. The original Hebrew, it has a definite article assigned to that garment. It's not a garment. It says the garment.
Okay, so you're thinking it's going back?
I think this is that supernatural garment from the Garden of God.
Interesting.
Because it was the symbol of kingship and priesthood. Theologically speaking, if you have a younger son trying to rebel and take the authority position, he's trying to take the crown. How fitting and poetic would it be for the sons that are refusing the rebellion to take that crown and place it back upon their father, saying, no, he's our leader.
Yeah, that's an excellent point that you made, is because when you really think about it, if you read the Septuagint, I want to say that there is about 2,500 years, like between when Adam was created and the flood. And I think in the Masoretic, it's about 1,600 years. Point being, the book of Genesis, regardless of which version you're reading, it takes place over thousands of years. Mm-hmm. So when you read the account of what happened after the flood, the natural assumption probably from us is just to read it like this is one day this stuff happens. But you're right that just because it's written like this, there could be massive room. And that's kind of what makes sense to me, is that you said that if he's cursing Ham's son, but we're not told that he really had any sons right then. Mm-hmm. So could he be cursing his son? And I've taken note about that, as you said, that Naamah likely was the wife of Noah that was on the ark. I find it very interesting, the omission of her name. It's almost like they don't speak her name because she was not good, because all the other patriarchs are shown. Well, I mean, we don't know Seth's wife. I don't think we know Seth's wife. Maybe we do. The point is
I
like
don't remember.
that when you think about like the patriarchs, you do think about who they were married to, and they don't, and they just mention that that everybody had a wife, but they don't name them.
Yeah.
In those.
And Naamah is also seen in Genesis. She is the daughter of Lamech. And what's weird to me, and it stands out, is genealogies, just this one begot that, lived 120 years, went to be with their ancestors, and they begot this, this, and this during their lifetime. It's very methodical, and it's all about men. It's the patriarch. But here they have a woman.
Right, so she was significant. It was significant they mentioned her. Right.
Yeah, so it's significant. But what's really wild to me is that it says that his sons, they were masters of their craft. One was a master of metallurgy. One was a master of, I can't remember now, the agrarian society, like farming and stuff, and then the other one was an expert at something else. But these three things that they were experts of, which is weird anyway, you're given genealogies. Why throw that in there? Because it's important. And those three things that were taught from the fallen angels, according to the book of Enoch. And then it says, here's Naamah. Her name means comely and beautiful. The book of Enoch says, the sons of God came down and bred with the daughters of men, because why? They were comely and beautiful. Could this have been one of the first women that they took and bred with, and as a thank you, taught her brothers the forbidden knowledge, the sacred sciences?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's an excellent question, because we really don't know when they started to really go off the rails. Because all we really know is that it's talking about Seth's line, and then there's these days where the people started to produce. And so when you get into the book of Enoch, this stuff has already long been happening, right? So in the times of Enoch, there's been a long, probably tradition of these races of giants. And they've bred so much that they've likely have been genetically corrupted. And that's why it's just like it's the nastiest time ever. It's a time so wicked that God decides to destroy the whole earth. But it doesn't really say like that who could have infiltrated these family lines in the times they did. But yeah, that does seem significant that they would mention that they were skilled at these trades. That, like, how would they have been skilled at these trades? How would they know about those things? Unless somebody told them. And I always thought that would made sense to me, is that what was really extra wicked about what the men's guilt of the sin of the angels likely was, they were probably bargaining over their daughters, like you would. It's like, you're giving your,
like Rebecca.
You're giving your daughter over to a king.
Gold,
like the king would have been.
It's birthrights, or not birthrights, what do they call that? A dowry.
Yeah, dowry.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, anyways, man, this is awesome. I would say that, yeah, like what you said earlier, when somebody might ask, like, why is this important? And I do like to, as we were talking off air, I said, I did read Michael Heiser's book, and I liked how he said, if it's weird, it's important.
It's important.
Well, there's sure a whole lot of weird in this conversation, but I think that I just think it's interesting. Like I said, that when I first got into reading my Bible again, that was one of the first things that really like clicked with me. Like, oh, this is cool. This is so interesting. All this stuff, and trying to understand the context does help flesh it out more in your mind, and I think it does make it more real to me. It's like trying to understand these people at that time. So I do think it's really important, and I think that I like how you put it, that we really don't know about these extra biblical texts, which is true, and I think that that's less important than if you can prove this is what the people believed at the time, and I think that gives you a better understanding of like maybe what people still believe today that maybe they don't tell you. And I think that's why it's important. But anyways, Doc, I really appreciate having you come on. Please tell people where they can find your book, and also what where else they can find you on social media.
Man, Joe, I really appreciate you having me on. And I was honestly really looking forward to it, because I knew I just wouldn't be dancing on stage doing my routine, that we'd actually have some back and forth. And exchanging of ideas. So I love that, man. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I had a great time. But guys, if you enjoyed this conversation and some of the things we talked about, we just skimmed the surface. This book is a 15-chapter book, and this was a 2-year obsession and deep dive of mine. But it's called The Epic of Esau, The Birthright and Seed War. You can find this on my website, PrometheusLensPodcast.com. You can get a signed copy there if you'd like, or you can go to Amazon and find it there. $20 for the physical copy, $10 for the digital. And I have recorded the audio in my voice and submitted it. It's going through the approval process for Audible right now. So pretty soon, if you can't read, hey, no judgments, or if you just don't want to read, you're without an excuse. You can even listen to me read it to you. But I really appreciate you having me, man. And as far as the podcast, Prometheus Lens, just search it up, man. Anywhere you can consume content, you can find me there. YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Same thing on all the social medias. Come join us on the hero's journey, man, where every week we go into the unknown. We slay the dragon. We hoard up the treasure, rescue the damsel. But then we take that prize of great wealth, man, that the Greeks legends talk about, which is Christ, the light, and try to share it with the world.
Amen, brother. Amen. Yeah, this was definitely awesome. Yeah, and so I'll try to put all your links, Doc, in the description so you guys can take out all the legwork for you. You guys check out the links in the description. But yeah, I appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Love you guys. God bless.